Okay, another great day. Welcome, everyone. This is Suresh, and we are here doing coffee time with Sales Table. By the way, this is another great episode that we are having with Robin Singh. And for those of you attending this week, Robin is a great mentor. He's a business owner as well as a Sandler's trainer, and in the first episode, we really talked about blind spots for business owners in terms of running the business, running the sales, and there are bunch of gems that we took. If you haven't really watched that one, please do go rewatch that or watch that one. And today, the focus really is two topics. One is really about what are the blind spots for CEOs, especially in the startups, SMBs, where the company is not really big. You may not really have a huge team, and it's really about what are those blind spots. That's really the one aspect of it. The second one is there is a lot of emphasis and criticality that is associated with hiring the right people, especially in sales. And that's what we are going to talk about. Without further ado, Robin, welcome.
Hey, Suresh, thanks again. Thanks for having me. And I look forward to this session today. As you mentioned, the last session, we covered the 13 blind spots that we see within organizations, both from a selling perspective and then from an organizational perspective. And the last session, if you recall, we covered some of the blind spots for, sales leaders and sales leadership. I think what I'd like to suggest is we kind of look at the blind spots for CEOs and businesses. What are they seeing, and then how do they fix those things, right? And then we move to one of my favorite topics, right? Hiring, hiring, and making sure we hire the right people, onboard them, etc. So why don't we kick that off? And if you don't mind, we've got the first slide I have from last week. If you have those available,
Yeah, just
I can
let
walk
me do
through.
one thing.
Yeah, right. And pretty much as you're doing that, there are, when we look at business owners, CEOs from small to mid-size organizations, they kind of fall into four categories. They're at risk, and I'll give you the details on the definition of that. They're an average run company. They're a well-managed company, and then they're a company that runs on excellence. And we see maybe about 5% of companies really at the excellence level. And once I'll share the definitions with you, so you'll understand what those look like. And the question is, as always, how do I get from if I am at risk company, or I'm an average company, how do I go from at risk to average, or how do I go from average to well managed, or how do I get from well managed to excellence? So we want to chat about it. I'll cover that today. And then the question is, how do I know where I am? Okay.
Right.
How do I know if I'm average, or how do I know if I'm well managed? Right. And so I think I gave you this. We have a tool that people can use to say, rank themselves, rank the organization. And we look at 6 P's, okay, and I'll cover those. And that's going to kind of tell you where you are. And then how do we get there? And from our perspective, it's, we give you the what, but we don't stop there at the what. This is what you have to do, right? And most companies say, here's what you have to do. From our perspective, we look at here's what you have to do, and here's the how. Okay?
Right.
Here's the how.
Right. So I have let me share right now.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yes.
So if you go to at risk, which is the first slide, yeah, right. And there you go, at risk. I'm not going to read all of it, but at risk, this is where the leaders, most of the time, they make all the decisions, and they spend roughly 90% of the time in their business. And if they try to leave or take time off, they can't, right? because they're so
Yeah.
involved in it. They're actually working in the business, as we say, right? And then you look at the average. The next one is average. Yeah. So average. This business is run in a reactive manner, and the
Gotcha.
leader spends, the leader spends maybe 30 to 50% of the time in the business again. They're a doer, right? Cash flow is average, which is interesting. Okay. And then you have the well managed, or well managed, yeah, well managed. And here they're kind of respected in the industry, and likely they're in the top 25 of businesses measured in terms of what we call professional leadership, right? But they're nevertheless they're still vulnerable to change if they just, probably sit back a little, or they're not eyes are not on the ball, they
Right.
can fall back to average. Okay. um, and then excellence, right? And excellence. This is where professional leadership is really at a reality, a daily reality, and these companies are improving on an ongoing basis, and they're always looking, they're always forward thinking, forward looking. Good leaders in this organization knows when things are going to happen, and so they're proactive versus reactive. And excellence is a way of life for business leaders. Okay. So those are the four categories that we find business owners are in, and these are the blind spots that can cause these things. Okay, to get them from, if they're at risk, these are because of they've got probably 13 blind spots. Okay, excellence, they may not have all 13 blind spots. They may have one or two, but they are
Right.
proactive in it, and they're constantly changing. Okay, the next slide is really how we get there. Okay. How do we make excellence a reality, right? And this is what we call the 6 Ps, right? We're planning. Okay. What does that look like? Position. So as an example, from a planning perspective, and what is our vision? What is our mission? Right? What are our top priorities? What is the organization? What does the org chart look like? A year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years
Right.
from now. And then we look at the positions. How do we get from average or well managed to excellence? Well, what are the positions that's required for us to get there? If we're a growing organization, there are new positions coming up. Do we wait for that to happen? Or are we planning ahead? Good leadership plans ahead for these things. Okay. So now we have a blank org chart of where we are today, and what are the open positions that we could have based on growth. Okay. Once we understand the positions there, then we look at the people. Okay. What are the people required for these open positions? Do we have them internally, or do we have to bring them from an external position? Okay. So now we look at the positions to fill those. And then the next one, once we have all those, what are the processes that we have to put in place, right? For that. So if you can pull that up a little so we could get a bit. So there's the processes. Okay. I'll go back one more. Sorry.
This is the
There
one.
you
Oh
go.
yeah, processes.
Yeah, there's processes, which is the fourth one, right? What are the processes that I have to put in place, right? So that my organization is in this excellent state, right, of running. As you know, right, Suresh, if I don't have processes, right, what happens? Right? And then if I put processes in place, I've got to measure it. Right? So what are those perform metrics that I'm using to measure the processes to make sure that they're KPIs as an example, right? That we're measuring these KPIs that we've put in place. And then the last one is passion. And we say to leaders, if you're not passionate about your business, even if you're not passionate about where you're going, if you're not passionate about the industry, the marketplace, you know what? How's your team going to be passionate, right? So those are the 6 Ps, and this is what we call the heart of the leadership model. And then this is the what, right? And then the how is really the next slide. Okay, and in the how, these are the 24 steps that you've got to take to get there. Okay, and as an example, in planning, there's 12 steps.
Wow.
In the planning piece,
Right.
right? I'm not going to go into details on it. And then from a position perspective, there is 3, right? From a people perspective, there is 4, right? And then from a process perspective, there's one, right? And these are all modules that we teach in this stuff. And then in the metrics, there's five, right? And then passion, passion is
Right.
just about you, right? It's a leader, right? And we go from there. So I wanted to cover this off so that, as from a CEO perspective, he understands, from his organization where the blind spots are and how using a model like this, we can overcome the blind spots. Now, what happens is what we see is most companies come in and they will go through the 24 steps, but that doesn't mean that they fix it because they could move from, by implementing this, they could move from at risk to average. Okay. Or they can implement, and then from here, they might come back next year and says, well, I've done all this, but I've got to implement 4 more, 5 more to
Right.
get to,
Right.
all right. And the cycle goes on. Okay. So by the time they get to excellence, right, they may have to start again, but it's only 1 or 2 things now they're working on, not 24. Okay.
Right.
And
Right.
so
Right.
that's the life cycle of it, right? So, and this is where we say, right, it's a daily reality. They're always improving their present situation.
It's
And
a
they're always
continuous
looking.
process.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. So I
So,
wanted to kind of wrap that up so we understand how it all entails now to the leadership side, CEO level leadership side of the business. Right.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, without any hesitation, I would say um, I've run startups, and previously, I think any startup that really goes from 0 to 1, I would say I've always started at risk.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right.
Right? And sometimes I think the biggest challenge between at risk and average is really, I would say, the biggest challenge that happens. Um, um, Robin, because at the end of the day, at risk time that or the phase that we are in, what you are doing, you are the seller, you are the founder led sales and the growth
Mm-hmm.
machine
Mm-hmm.
that you built in. You are taking care of the product, you are taking care of everything, but the transformation has to say, how do I kind of take help from other leaders
Mm-hmm.
to delegate some of these critical tasks that I have on a daily basis. I think that's really where I think of it as crossing the chasm, right? In a
Yes.
way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because if I don't do that, then I'm just constantly in that kind of cycle of, yes, doing the same thing again and again. Yes, I think probably for some personalities of the people that might actually work really well, but it is
Right.
just that they cannot grow the business after some point of time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So Robin, I mean, this is actually a good segue for me because about 2 weeks back I actually spoke with one of the CEO, and they have this kind of not a unique problem, by the way, right? So
Mm.
he was describing the challenges as, he was like, hey Suresh, I have built this sales machine, and then I brought in 2 salespeople, and
Mm-hmm.
one of them are senior sales person, and then the second one is probably he's thinking of them more as the SDR kind of
Mm-hmm.
person. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, hey, that's great. I mean, you were able to bring in additional help.
Mm-hmm.
And so how are the sales? I mean, how are you thinking through? And then he was like, he chuckled and they said, hey, I don't think it's really working out. And then I'm like, okay, tell me more. And he's like, hey, it's been about a year that we brought them in, and then I don't really see any growth or the kind of revenue that we are expecting. And there is no aggressive action in terms of what should be accomplished. And because I brought them in, I'm probably not in that seat of sales anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually getting really nervous because my board is really asking me to kind of take next steps, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And while, I mean, the reason why I'm sharing that is that situation is not unique. I'm sure,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of leaders, especially in that stage, it is a very common thing.
Mm-hmm.
But when we really look into what he mentioned, that's really where I wanted to kind of discuss with you today, which is he brought them in. He wasn't really sure if he was supposed to bring in a VP of sales or a sales rep, or even if you say a sales rep, what are those skill sets that I really need to look into this person to really help me, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's actually a very valid, genuine problem that a lot of CEOs have, as to
Mm-hmm.
say, yes, I've done this for so long, I brought in revenue for whatever time, and now when I'm looking for that help, what kind of help should I really need, I think is really the first question that
Yeah.
everybody asks. And that's something that I would love to get your thoughts on. How should somebody really think about that problem?
Yeah. Yeah. So, from my personal opinion, my personal experience, if you, the two things to think about: are you going to transition the sales responsibility over, or are you going to be managing the sales? So let's assume that you are managing. You decide you want to manage the sales. Okay. So if you're going to manage the sales, hopefully you know how to coach, you know how to train. Okay. Uh, you got to run your business. Okay. And so you've got all these hats that you're wearing. Okay. At the same time, you've got to motivate, manage your sales teams. You've probably got to go out on joint sales calls with them. You got to make sure that you define what the ideal client profile is for them, so you can guide them. Okay. You got to make sure that your sales system and your selling process is consistent. So you've got a playbook that you can hand to them. Say, okay, here you go. Okay. That's your responsibility if you want to become that leader. Or you say, you know what, I don't want to do that. Right?
Right.
Let me bring somebody in, okay, that has got that experience. That's where I bring a VP of sales in, and I make sure the VP of sales has got all the skill sets and the requirements that are required to make sure I can hire properly. I know how to train, I know how to coach, I know how to mentor my teams, I know how to supervise them. Okay? That's the decision they make. If they make the I want to manage a team, that's okay. Hopefully you can do all of this stuff. Most times it probably don't work. Okay. Um, because they still got to run their business. They should be worried about, hey, let me work on the business versus trying to work in it. And then it becomes cash flow also, right? And they look at it from a cash flow perspective. I got to pay a VP of sales what 150 in the U.S. average. I'm not sure what that is there, right?
Yeah.
So they may look at that number, right, and say, I don't sure want to do that. But then look at the long term. Okay, think about the person you were just referring to, right? 1 year later, what is that costing him on average, right? Uh, we see about 5x on a poor hire. Okay, so two guys, let's say you pay them, in the Bay Area, probably 80, 90K, I think. Okay?
Right.
Right? So 12 months times 90, okay? That's the hard dollars plus the soft dollars. Okay. So again, right? Depends on what they want to do.
Great.
Right? And they've got to
Yeah.
look at it from that perspective. And if you ask me, I would say, you know what, that's not your job. Go find a good VP of sales, right? And let him come in, let him do the right hires, and hold him accountable to hiring the right team and growing the revenues. Okay?
Right, right, right. So you said it right, which is for a lot of CEOs and the business owners, it's really the question of, hey, I've been doing all this outbounds or inbounds or outreaches. I've set up a little bit of motion in terms of the sales.
Yeah.
And the one of the biggest challenges that I see, Robin, is they really think of the new leader who is coming in to exactly do what they are doing, right? Which is a completely wrong thing, because for you as a founder-led sales or somebody who is probably not a sales leader, you don't have that craft, you don't have that vision into what that could look like. So that's one of the things that I will always hear from in the founder community and my
Yep.
kind of colleagues and friends, where
Right.
they kind of set them up for failure, unfortunately, right? Because at the end of the day, when you bring in a sales leader, you are bringing them up because they really know the craft, they have been there, done that, or even if not, they have the right attitude to actually take on this new goal and challenge that you have. So instead of doing that, they are so attached to the process that they are doing. They want the new leader to replicate the process, and that's not a great thing. And I would love to kind of get your thoughts on how that in your experience transpired.
So am I? So the question becomes: am I micromanaging my VP?
Right, 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 right.
If I'm micromanaging my VP, it ain't gonna work, right? If you're gonna hire me to run your sales, right, then you got to trust me. And if you can't trust your VP of sales, then you probably got the wrong person sitting on this. On you. First off, you probably made a. First off, it's a mindset. I think you got to change your mindset, right? The mindset as a CEO says, I'm going to hire a VP of sales who knows the business, knows the selling business, knows how to hire, knows how to motivate a team, who knows how to manage numbers, and numbers, funnel management is a it takes a lot from a VP perspective to understand funnel management, right? And how to manage his teams from that perspective. It takes a lot for a VP of sales to understand how to coach his team, right? There's skill sets that's required there. Hiring, what's the right type, man? Some VPs of sales, they've got a good team that they can bring with them that work with them. Those are things that you may want to look for, right? But yeah, if you're going to hire me to micromanage me and tell me how to run them, then it's not going to work. Right? You got to
Yeah,
have
yeah,
you got
yeah.
to make sure you hire the right guy. You have trust in him, right? You know what you're looking for. You interview and make sure you've got the right skill sets and everything else that goes along with what's required, and just let him loose. Let him
Yeah,
loose.
yeah, yeah.
Right? Now, you should have an onboarding process which says, what are we going to measure? What do you measure in 30 days? What do you measure in 60 days? What do you measure in 90 days? Even at the VP level. And that should be his job, right?
Right,
Make
right.
sure he gets onboarded properly. Now sitting with him and saying, okay, what are we measuring? Okay. What are we measuring? And let's define that. Because if you bring me on, I'm going to say, okay, what do you want me to accomplish in the first 30 days? What do you want me to accomplish in the first 60 days? What do you want me to accomplish in the first 90 days? Okay.
Right.
And
So
and now I know, and now we're on the same page, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, Robin, just to dig deeper over there,
Yep.
when we think about the KPI setting for the sales leaders who have come in, the one aspect of it is to say, yes, the 30, 60, 90-day kind of goal setting process. And one of the, I would say, a bit of a controversial topic out there is, should you actually attach the quota within the first 30, 60, 90 days, or should it take longer time for that person to actually deliver? And what is your thought on that?
So I don't know how you can attach a quota in 30 days, right? Or a revenue target in 30 days. Unless you're selling something that is really, really consumable related, right? Well, let's think about IT from a different perspective, right? If I've got to sell this, application that's X number of dollars, okay? What's the cycle? What's the sales cycle for that? We need to understand what that is. Is it a 3-month sales cycle? Is it a 10-week sales cycle? So we understand the sales cycle. Then we go, okay, what is the ramp up? How well do I need to be trained to really understand the application? Or are you bringing me in with experience? Right? which says I know how to sell an ERP application or I know how to sell a hosted application, right? I still need to understand what I'm selling unless it's competitive in nature, right? Then there's still going to be some differentiators, right? So depending on what it is that I'm selling, what's the sell cycle, okay? What's the training involved, right? To get me ramped up before I could say, here's quota, right? Um, so every every situation is different, right? And we just got to figure out what is the situation, and we apply that onboarding piece to it.
Right.
Right? Does that make sense? Right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, the reason why I say that is at the end of the day, a lot of CEOs and founders don't know how much time should you give to the VP of sales or the sales team until you know that it's not working out, right? Because
Yeah,
that's the biggest challenge. I mean, is it going to be 1 quarter, two
yeah,
quarters, or is it 1 year? Because again, in the specific case that I mentioned about my friend, I mean,
yeah,
he's been through the one complete year, but
yeah,
without any output on the revenue cycle, and
yeah,
now he is really thinking, what was that right time
right,
that I should have said, you know what, things are not
yeah,
working out.
yeah. So let's use your friend as an example, right? Let's use, and we don't need names, but what do you think? What's the average? Do you know what the average price of his product is?
It's about $100,000 per year.
All right, so $100,000. Okay, and so if you think about $100,000, if we say, what's the average sales cycle on 100,000 in his world? 6 months.
It's about, yeah, probably, yeah,
Six
yeah,
months. Okay. So now we go. Okay, it's 6 months. Now I'm managing. Let's say I'm managing the team, right? So I go, okay, Mr. CEO, you tell me it's 6 months. Okay. All right. So now in the first 6 months, right? Let's say it takes me 3 months to really understand what's going on. The next 3 months, I should be making some calls. I should have some meetings set up. I should have some conversations going on. Okay. And hopefully I want to have at least one presentation going to proposal.
okay,
That's
okay,
true, right? Right. So at least if I close one deal in 6 months, guess what? There we go. Okay. So now I'm the CEO. I go, okay, let's assume we follow that. Okay. I go, okay. So we had 3 months to ramp. Okay. Let's look at, we call them leading indicators. Okay. How many calls were we made? How many conversations we had? Okay.
right,
All right. And I
yeah,
and I start measuring the leading indicators. Okay. And if the leading indicators aren't there, the lagging indicators ain't going to happen, which is the results. Okay. So that's whether you have that methodology thinking or not, I don't know, right? But I'm using that as a simple example to say, hey, right? If the sales cycle is 6 months, right? What is the leading indicators that leading up to that, one sale in the first 6 months? What is the expectations? So if I was a CEO, I would say, if I was the VP of sales or the sales guy, I would go, okay, what do you expect from me in the first 6 months? Right? One sale. All right. Let me tell you what's going to happen in one. Now I start managing him. Okay. Here's what needs to happen to get to one sale. All right. 3 months of training. Got you done. You got 3 months now. You got 90 days to go knock on doors. Okay. Cold calling, prospecting, emailing, whatever that is. And each of those should lead to something.
right, right, right,
So now I'm managing my teams. Okay. But as a CEO, maybe I'm doing so many other things, right? That I'm not focused on this piece. And so the ball gets dropped. Right? And then 12 months later, we go like, Jesus, okay. I don't know if that's the situation, but I'm saying,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, no,
Yeah.
no, completely. I mean,
Yeah.
so the net
I don't
of
know if
that
that
is,
answer, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
answer.
yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's really a bit of a framework as to think about what's your
Yes.
sales cycle, what does it really mean for you, what's
Yeah.
the ramp time that you have,
Right.
and then factor the ramp time, factor the sales cycle, and then on the top of it, define really the activity that you
Yeah.
expect them to do,
You got it.
and the outcomes, right?
That's right.
Yes, I mean, the outcome definitely is the revenue, that is
Yeah.
clear. But
Yeah.
to get to the revenue, what are those, at least some indicators as to say,
Yeah.
okay, what is the pipeline that we created at this point
Yeah.
of time?
Yeah.
How many
Yeah.
demos did we do? I mean,
Yeah.
who is showing
Yeah.
the interest, right?
That's
If none of these leading indicators are there, it doesn't really
yeah.
matter if the target is $1 million or $500,000. We are
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
not going to achieve because there is nothing in the
Yeah.
pipeline or the funnel as such.
Right. Exactly. So, and as a good leader, right, I'm managing my team and I'm looking at my leading indicators. I can't manage my numbers. I got to manage the leading indicators. By the time I manage the numbers, it's too late, right?
Right.
Or the results, it's too late, right? So good leaders will manage those leading indicators that's required for different organizations, right?
Glad that you talked about the leading indicators and then not. We don't directly control the numbers per se, and that's one point, especially with sales table, Robin.
Yeah,
That's exactly our belief, right? Which is yes, the upskilling and training is very important, but at the
yeah,
same time, the inputs of what your salespeople are doing on a day-to-day basis are
yeah,
so important that those are the ones that you want to understand, that you
yeah,
want to be able to coach, and not really about the $1 million quota that
yeah,
you ask them to bring in,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And on top of that, so a sales table, I think will help, even if it's young CEOs that doesn't want to hire as yet, use sales table to say, okay, I've got a team in here. Okay, are they attending training? Okay. And sales table will help me with that, right? Are they doing the leading indicators? Guess what are those leading indicators? Define what that could be, right? It could be prospecting, cold calling. It could be, it could be LinkedIn, connections. It could
outreaches.
be email, whatever that is, right? In their world, sales table, plug it in there, manage it. You meet with your team at the beginning, every Friday or every Monday, and says, okay, what are your activities this week? At the end, so Friday, what are you doing? Monday, what are you doing this week? Friday, what do you accomplish? Bring up
Exactly.
sales table. Let's see what happened. Okay, boom. Okay,
Absolutely. The one thing, again, I know you hit on it right, Robin, which is by the time you know that whether somebody hit the quota or not, it's too late, right? By the time all that we are doing is the rear view mirror to really look back and then say, oh, you know what, as a sales rep or as an inside salesperson or whatever, whoever that person is, you should have done more.
yeah,
But unfortunately, that doesn't work that way,
yeah,
right? And that's really when I think there is definitely a lot of industry leaders that are coming in support of saying,
yeah,
yes, I think the quotas are important, the numbers are important, but we also need to manage the inputs, and that
yeah,
is going to be very, very important, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So Robin, I
So
know.
sorry, and one last piece, and that's the difference between a good VP of sales and a not so good VP of sales, if I may say that. Okay.
Gotcha. Okay, wow.
And as a CEO, if I could define and understand from a VP of sales, how you're measuring success, how you measuring your team, right? Then that'll help me make a good, decision on, hiring a good VP. And we'll talk about that later on. How do we do that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, Robin, just taking the same thought forward as to say, let's say now I realize that probably the people that I have, I may need to kind of, redo, bring in new talent, and whether it is from the leadership point of view or the sales reps point of view. Let's say once I decide that, hiring itself is a major challenge. Not many CEOs or even great VP of sales doesn't understand completely. And from your standpoint of view, I know you worked with hundreds of leaders out there. How do you really think about the entire sales hiring process on its own? Because at the end of the day, it is one thing to say, oh, you know what, I'll just bring in the salespeople, hire and fire kind of approach. But unfortunately, what many don't understand is, yes, you can absolutely do that as a leader. You might have that authority to do that. But once you fire somebody, or once you let go of somebody, your morale is decreasing within the
Hmm.
teams. Number
Hmm.
one. Number two, you are spending incredible amount of time on recruiting time, ramp up time once the new person comes in, and during this, which is typically about almost 6 months or so, you are actually losing the revenue because there is nobody trying to bring in that revenue that this person would have brought in,
Right.
right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's really the kind of negative side of that thought process, has to say, oh, you know what, no, I can just bring in people, and then if they don't work out, I'll fire. So
Right.
instead, I think you talked about
Yeah.
the reactive hiring versus the proactive hiring. Let's
Yeah.
say if I'm really be cognizant of these negative effects of not hiring good people, how should I be really thinking about it? Are there any frameworks that that can help me?
Yeah. No, great question. Great question. So, first off, let's remember, and from Sandler's research, it's 5 to 8 times, right? That's hard dollars, the cost of a mishire.
Oh,
Okay,
wow.
and that doesn't include soft dollars. Okay, so let's keep that in mind as a starting framework, right? Now, if you think about the typical hiring process that takes place, me and you chatted about this earlier, right? It's like, you're interviewing me for a sales position. I come in, right? I do a really, really good sales job on you. And you go, Robin, you know what? My gut says I like him. I like this guy. The next person that interviews me in your department does the same thing, interview me, probably ask me a bunch of different questions, right? And comes back and says, yeah, I kind of like him. Gut feel says he's going to make it, right? I did a great sales job in both members of your team, and then you hire me on, and you're expecting great things of me, right? And 3 months later, you go like, hang on a second, I hired Tom Cruise here, and I got Mickey Mouse. Okay, right? Where did we go wrong? Okay, where did we go wrong? Okay, uh, typically right. I mean, we've seen some of this, right? So is there a framework for this? Yes, there is. And everybody's does it differently. Some companies depend on recruiting firms, right? In a past life, I depended on recruiting firms, and they brought me some pretty good people, and they brought me some lousy people.
Yeah.
Right? So that's one. That's still around today. I still got clients. Some of my clients, they still depend on recruiters to help them find people because they don't have the time to go out and post and search and all the good stuff, right? So some people do recruiters. All right. So now I get a recruiter, and the recruiter says, "Here is your guy." Okay. All right. So how did you define the candidate profile? That's the first thing we got to look at. Okay. So if you just say to a recruiter, go find this guy for me, right? And I want 5 years of experience in sales or in technology, and you should have this and this background, etc. You could probably go find the same thing. Right? But there's two things that we look for, that we recommend. One is we call them a research model.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
if you pull that up, okay, I can walk you through what that looks like from
Yep.
that
I'm
we
pulling it.
recommend or use with our clients. Okay. Now it's not going to work for everybody, but that's page 6 on that one. There you go. There you go. Right. There you go. So if you could bring that up a little, right? So we can, yeah. So I've got what, 20 minutes on this. Okay. So if you look at the research model, right? R, right, stands, right? And Suresh, I don't know if
Yeah.
you can read that better than I can, right? But research says, right, what are the outcomes needed for the person and the role that we're going to hire, right? Well,
Right.
okay. The E stands for, right, what is essential job functions, right? Functions that are, that are one of his responsibility. It could be territory management, as an example, right? Results needed could be hitting quota 100%, right, in
Yeah.
12
Yeah.
months, right? in 1 year. Skills, right? What are some of the specific capabilities, right? And technical or not and non-technical skills that's required for the position. What does that look like? Okay. What are some of the experiences, right? That's required. Okay? Attitude is a big one. Attitude. Okay. Results. What are results needed? And I can't. Right. Um, yeah. So results. Cognitive skills. Right. What are cognitive skills? The ability to kind of overcome any type of obstacles that he may be faced with in this role, right? Through
Right.
problem solving and learning, right? And then the habits, those behaviors and tasks, right? That needs to be done on a regular basis that will kind of lead to results, right? So we kind of recommend taking something like this, completing it out, and say, here's the guy, here's somebody that I'm looking for. So now when we interview collectively as a team, we're all preaching from the same book, right? We're all looking for the same thing. It's well defined, right? And it's not gut feel, right? It's not gut
Right.
feel, right? Now I can reinforce this now with assessments. Okay? I've got all this stuff now, and as a third optional, just kind of reinforce my hiring thoughts. I can run assessments on the individual, on the behaviors and the competencies that's required for the position to reinforce this. Okay, and depending on the assessments you use, they've got some good interview questions in there, and they've got some good training techniques or training tips that they recommend. When hiring, because nobody's perfect, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
if you're looking for that perfect person, you ain't gonna find them, right? I don't think. Maybe I'm wrong, right? But I'm not perfect. Okay, uh, so so let's assume that we've got somebody that's got 90% of what we're looking for, 80% of what we're looking for. Okay, so then there's got to be some training required, and depending on the areas that comes out from a competency or an assessment perspective, right? Um, and then we make that offer. But this to me is a lot better than saying, hey, you know what, that my gut feel says he's going to cut it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's one aspect of it. And the biggest thing that I'm thinking through is, as we hire other people, let's say, I mean, probably this month I hired one person, and then in the next 2 months I'm hiring two more people, let's say. If there is no standardized way to evaluate candidates that I am talking to, then I just can't compare my process.
Yeah.
Right. So today, yes, it is my gut feeling. Next month it could be a couple of other colleagues gut feeling, but
Yeah.
there is
Yeah.
nothing like I can compare in the past and say,
Yeah.
hey, you know what, based on the framework that we have, here is
Yeah.
where we brought in somebody, didn't work out, looks
Yeah.
like that is the same pattern happening.
Yeah. Exactly. Right.
Right.
And remember the blind spot that we spoke about, not having a process for hiring.
Yeah.
There's a blind spot. Right. So how do we solve that blind spot? Boom. Here's an example where I'm saying this is it, but I'm saying, have something, have a model, whatever it is in your world, right, to take
Right.
care of that blind spot. Right.
Completely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, Robin, just to make sure that we do this well, I mean, where I'm really thinking through is, for example, a lot of it, it's easy to say we need somebody who's been there, done that. I mean, I think, that's one thing a lot of leaders do, but it might be that, maybe you are a startup, you are a small business, and you don't have, you are not able to attract that talent that you think that you want, let's say, if that is the case. But at the same time, with the right attitude and the cognitive skills that people have, I think there is something to be talked about where it could be young talent or somebody
Hmm.
who hasn't really done that before, but
Hmm.
if they have the right attitude. I've seen in cases where they would come in, they would kill the
Hmm.
quota or whatever role that they are in, just because they are not really afraid of doing things. They own the stuff, and they are really looking towards saying, yes, I don't know this, I will go figure it out.
Right, right, exactly, right.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, we've seen you talked about CEOs, bringing people that's got the experience, and yeah, I've seen situations where you bring them in with great experience, but God, the attitude, right?
Yeah.
Attitude it affects the entire organization, right? Um, so, and I see this, believe it or not, I see this sometimes on a too regularly, but I can't get rid of him because he's driving numbers, but he's affecting the morale of the team, right?
Right.
Right,
Right. Right.
right. Um, in fact, I've seen that right now going on in one situation. But anyway, so yeah, so if I only bring in and I say I just want experience, but I don't look at the other aspects of cognitive skills or habits or attitude, or am I going to miss it? I'm going to have the right person sitting on the right seat on the bus, right?
Right. Right.
Uh, you know, so let's be wary that it's not just only experience. I think there's a whole bunch of other things that go along with it that we really need to do a deep dive on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, with all these things, one thing that I am really thinking through is the way this research model has very nicely laid out. I think quantitative and qualitative metrics is what
Yep.
how I'm thinking through, Robin, because
Yep.
the results needed and the experience probably is more of a quantitative angle, as to say,
Yep.
for example, a candidate has 15 years of experience, 20 years of experience, and they brought in whatever $10 million, $100 million worth of the quota. And then from the results needed, yes, I mean, when we talk to the candidate, it felt like they are the right people to get to these quota attainment and
Yep.
whatnot. But the
Yep.
rest of the ones are so qualitative in nature. And I think a lot of CEOs and founders actually miss out on these things because,
Yep.
yes, I think we really keep thinking about the attitude and the skills,
Yep.
but it's very difficult to kind of assess them during a half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hour interview process,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. So you touched a good point on experience, and it's not just about the years, but also it's what is the type of clients that they've called on, right? What are how relevant it is to the role that I'm hiring for, right? So
Right.
those are other things that we need to consider, right? Um, so yeah, I just love that research model piece. Um, I mean, I'm not saying it's the all end of or be it's the all end, but if you think about the hiring mistakes, the
Right.
right 5 to 10 times. And what happens if I can use a model that can lower my hiring mistakes by whatever percentage?
Right. Right. Right.
And then the
Uh,
assessments to go with. The assessments, we don't touch assessments. The assessments are another critical part of anything that we do, that we recommend also, right? Because that really is the MRI. And depending on the
right.
assessment you use, right? It really is the MRI of,
So,
of the
Robin,
individual.
you talked about a nice thing, which is the assessments. Would you
Yeah.
think of assessments during the hiring process, or how do you think about that? Because the reason why I ask is, for example, I know I've been in the technology and the product for long enough. For example, when we're hiring engineers, there is a very standardized way to say, think about the algorithms, write some coding, and you would typically understand how they are from the engineering point of view. And the same thing is with the product management. You give them a problem, they will solve it, or you ask them to design a feature, they design it, and you know exactly at least how they are thinking. But from the
Hmm.
sales hire point of view, as you rightly said, a lot of whether it is SDRs or reps or sales leaders, they are very good at selling, which means they're also very good at selling that role to you, right? So if that is
Hmm.
the case, how should we be thinking about understanding this nuanced approach of assessments to really understand, are they the right people that they are talking about?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's another conversation, by the way, another session, okay? Because I'm looking at the clock and I know we're out of
Yeah,
time. But
yeah.
here's yeah, here's an example of I'll give you one example, okay? Um, one of the things you look for in a salesperson is resiliency, okay?
Yeah,
Uh, how often he's got to make calls, and is he resilient enough to get rejected and rejected and rejected and still pick the phone up and go again? Okay, so we look for those things. We look for goals, goal setting. Is he goal driven? Right?
right.
Because I want somebody, we want somebody that is very goal driven. They want to get from A to B, B to C in their life, in their career, in their personal life. They've got to be goal driven from a personal perspective. Okay? So those are examples of two things. I mean, there's about 15 or 16 things we look at from a competency behavior perspective that we evaluate, okay? From a sales perspective, right? Are they process oriented, right? In other words, can they follow a process in any type of selling system? Because remember the blind spot,
Yeah,
no sales system process. Well, if I'm going to put a system and process in place, I want to make sure that my guy that I'm hiring can follow a process, right? And sometimes they're not able to do that just because of their behavior or competency style, right? Right. So there's another example of things that we look for. Okay?
right, right, right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty insightful view for me, and I'm sure for the viewers as well. Robin, I know for me the net, I think today, to sum it up everything, it's really about, I think, from the business owner's point of view, really trying to understand how much of time that somebody is spending in the business, and then what are the ways that we can probably bring in help,
Hmm.
delegate some of these strategic items, so that you can really think about the scaling aspect of it, whether it is fundraise for you or product
Hmm.
for you, doesn't really matter, but what is that critical thing only you can do, and delegate the rest of important things to other leaders. I think that's really one theme that we talked about. And then from the hiring standpoint of view, it's really about the research model, which is basically to say, on a quantitative and qualitative basis, think about what kind of people that you want, and then keep that as a scorecard for you as you go through your hiring process, just so you can compare, contrast the people
Hmm.
that you have, and really make those
Hmm.
uniform decisions, rather than, yes, gut feeling, definitely at the end of the day, yes, that is important, but
Hmm.
you also have to have the gut based decisions on data, and
That's right.
that's what this model really provides, I guess, right?
Right. Right.
That's really where for me the takeaways are. As Robin, I mean, yeah, any lost thoughts, please?
And then we kind of reinforce that with our assessments, and we take care of the blind spot of not having a process for hiring, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Right.
No, Robin, I mean, this is wonderful insights, and I'm really looking forward for the next two, by the way. And we will again meet in next 2 weeks then.
That's
Robin,
good. Yep.
thanks a lot for the
Yep.
time.
Thanks, Suresh, and I appreciate it. Take care. Okay.
Bye.
Goodbye.